So my name is Nkosi King, originally from Coldwater, Mississippi, one of the smallest towns in Mississippi. Recently migrated to Atlanta, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. I moved down here during the pandemic. So now I've been, over the years, I essentially been in the tech industry, and simply just helping people's lives become more profitable and more efficient through the strategic use of technology. But man, I'm just really, really glad to be here, and just essentially to help, empower people with this knowledge and wisdom that I have, for sure.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Pull your camera down for me just a little bit so your face don't be cut off. Like
You
that.
got me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, what really made you get into the industry that you're in, and what really made you dive into the journey that you're on right now?
Well, I mean, I think for the most part, like I said, I'm from Mississippi for the most part. And if you ever been to Mississippi, even if you haven't, you probably heard Mississippi is not as industrialized, as most major cities like Atlanta. So it's not a lot of economic mobility, a lot of social mobility there. But even just getting into entrepreneurship, I think it's just for the most part, it's just my nature. That being, my family pretty much ran an organization pretty much predominantly all of my life. So essentially, entrepreneurship and business is essentially what I know. And a fun fact about me and my family, and my father, he was the first black man to go downtown and integrate the town and actually open up a business. He then ended up proceeding to scale that business to about 250, 300 full-time employees, full benefits and everything. So it's just during that time, man. And I was, like in maybe 6 or 7 years. You can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, 6 or 7 years old, and at the time he was just always talking business. So quite naturally, I picked up that dialect, and it kind of transpired into the way I think and perceive the world today. Went on to school and went to college and things like that to study business. At the time I didn't quite understand why I was studying what I studied, but everything happens for a reason at the right time. It happened on divine time. Um, and right after college, man, I ended up, like I said, I moved to Atlanta, coming from Mississippi, which is a less industrialized, city economy, whatever, however you want to put it. And you put me in a city, everything is much faster. Everything is moving. When I first got here, I tell people this all the time. From that transition from Alabama to Atlanta, the pace of traffic is tremendous. I think coming from Mississippi, we driving 40, 50, 50 miles an hour on the interstate, and for the most part in Atlanta, you driving about 70 or 80. And so that was kind of like a rude awakening to me, just a friendly introduction to Atlanta. And mind you, moving here, it was my first time ever, coming to Atlanta when I moved here. I just kind of packed up my bags and I told my mom that, hey, man, I'm moving to Atlanta. I just can't live here in Mississippi. So I got here, man, and the rest was history.
That's super dope, man. I think it's super dope to that you had that seed and planted in you as well. I think that's super important for our community to have those role models. Especially it being your parents, because I come from a time, especially when I first started and jumped into the world of entrepreneurship. Our parents really didn't really understand it. Most for most of us, growing up in the city. So, props to pops, man, for sure, man. Shout out to some people that we got on with us live, man. If you rocking with us live, shout out to official Shabazz. He said that black man was on the move and doing for self. Props to pops for sure, most definitely, most definitely. Shout out to KRM DG who just joined. Who else we got on here, man? Shout out to Kev Investor. Shout out to Chrissy B.
Yeah,
What's
but
going on? Um,
what's up, bro?
but I love it, man. I love it, man. So what's it like, really having somebody like your pops to kind of show you the ropes, and did that really kind of add a certain type of pressure, like I gotta do something bigger.
Yeah, for the most part, I always kind of knew. He told me from a young age, like I didn't quite understand it at the time. But as I got older, I kind of fully embraced my role and what it is that I'm designed here and put on planet Earth to do. But essentially, he raised me to be a leader. And at that time, in the young adults, you pretty much want to be kind of just like friends and try to be normal. But in actuality, that's just not the case. During that time, like I said, in Mississippi, it's not a lot of black men that's really, regulating commerce like that, especially at that scale. And so, for me, from their perspective, hey, you think you got it all, you think you this, you think you that, but in actuality, that was just the life that I live. And a lot of times, I did find myself trying to submit to certain situations and try to be regular with those kids, but it just wasn't the case. But at the time, I really didn't fully understand it either. I couldn't really articulate it or put it into words what it was that I was feeling. But reflecting back on it, man, my family, my people, they used to tell me what it was, but I just fully, couldn't grasp what it was that I was experiencing because I was too young to fully interpret what was going on. But mind you, I'm the youngest in my whole entire family, so they used to tell me these things, and my pops, my mom, they was in their 40s when they had me. So by the time I was, um, you know, 8, 10 years old, they was already in their 50s. So essentially, quite naturally, I would be someone who would be considered to have an old soul.
Oh,
So even still today, people tell me that I have a mind of a 30, 40-year-old man, but I'm only 27. So I guess,
okay.
for the most part, it's definitely had its impact on me in a way that I view and perceive the world. But I'm also grateful and thankful that it did it the way that it is, because I catch myself in certain rooms and being able to sit at certain tables and have really really high level conversations with really really high net worth individuals, and I don't nowhere near have the amount of wealth that they have. But of course, I'm on my way and I'm heading in that direction for sure.
Most definitely, most definitely. Hey, I can attest for that, King, for sure, man. You could definitely do your thing, and you could definitely see the product in that. And it's good to hear these stories, and because you don't hear these stories a lot. You always hear that. And most of us don't grow up with fathers. For the most part. Especially coming from inner city. But I think that's what leads to a lot of other problems. But this the solution, man, for sure. And you're a prime example. So real quick, man, for an icebreaker question. And if you just now tapping in with us live as well, make sure you guys blow up the chat with your answers. What's a brand that you absolutely love, and what makes it so memorable to you?
Do it have to be a brand, or could it absolutely be just a company that I'm just really astounded by or intrigued by?
Oh yeah, it could be a company. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I'm gonna say Vista Equity Partners, just for the simple fact, Robert Smith, he is probably one of the, if not the richest black man in America. Is doing what he's doing, man. I'm truly, inspired by what he do and being able to do for so much for people, and people of color. And like I said, for me, when I came out of college, man, yeah, essentially college teach you how to go be good workers. You get in all this debt, but essentially you go to find you a job that you really can't depend on.
Right.
And quite naturally, quite naturally, my family my dad didn't want me to go to college. He thought it was the dumbest thing that I could have done in the world, because I got a lot of that wisdom just from being around him and being around organized and structure. But I,
That's
I would say
dope.
Robert Smith, man. I
Hey,
actually had an
we need your pops on. We need pops to get on the next brainstorm session for sure. I love it.
Yeah, man, he was doing some really, really amazing things, and huge shout out to my mom as well too, man. She was a real queen for sure. I tell people all the time, I was born a king, but I was raised by a queen.
Yes,
You
sir.
know, and I can't help that. That's my last name. I was born with that name. So, but essentially, I still want to empower every individual, to and remind them that they're kings as well too. And it's not an ego thing, and none of that. We're all kings and queens. But yeah, huge shout out to my mom as well too.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I love it. I love it, man. Hey, behind every great man, it's a great woman for sure.
Yeah, man.
And that's the only way it can be, man, for sure. Like,
Yeah, she definitely set the standards high. It's hard out here for these women, man, because my standards are so high.
hey, I swear, like I'm just I still to this day I just be so grateful. Like, man, I don't even know how I found my queen, because like, man, I'm so grateful for her, because just what you said, it's like, look, I come from a different cloth. You get what I'm saying? My mother moved different, so it's the same energy. So it was definitely hard for sure, for sure. So that was definitely a good one, man. If you still tapped in with us, man, let me see some of y'all answers, man. Let me see what
Yeah,
brand look
I
like for
can't
you.
really see the comments, so you gotta relay them over to me when you get them.
Yeah, I got you. I got you. Yes, sir. We getting you getting a lot of love, man. We got Kevin invested. They basically saying you definitely have an old soul.
That's funny.
Yes, sir. Okay, it is the best. NU is the best brand, but I hear you, brother. Yes, sir. I
Oh yeah,
love.
that's a fact. I can't forget about my own brand. It's in you, not on you. Shout
Yes,
out
sir.
to Destiny Shabazz for that slogan. We've been tapped in for a minute. She the one coined that term, and I'm gonna make sure she get her flowers for that in a long time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I love it. I love it. I love it. So the reason why I asked this question, I think the reason why this is a good icebreaker question because we is talking about branding, we is talking about marketing, and that's really what it's all about. Being memorable. And especially when you want to become a household name. That's what we want. Essentially, especially if you're in it for the long run, you really want to become a household name. And at the end of the day, it's not just about having a product. You want to figure out how can you really connect with the community, and how can you actually benefit them? How can you be memorable out here? So that's what it's all about. This is something that we talk about, with all of our members all the time, and probably one of our biggest modules because you know a brand is nothing without marketing a brand. So real quick, while we're talking about that, what's one unconventional marketing strategy that's really worked for you, and how did you really come up with it?
Well, for the most part, man, I came up with it. I've been working in sales for primarily since I've been in Atlanta. So just utilizing what these major corporations are utilizing and some of the information that they gave upon me, and it's just applying it to my own infrastructure. Some of this, I mean, for me, for the most part, I'm not real big on social media at this point. I don't do a lot of marketing and advertising. What I simply do, I just use tools like Zoom Info to retrieve information, use HubSpot to essentially, do all of the marketing gimmicks and stuff like that. We use a tool called Constant Contact as well. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but that does allow me to put all of my marketing material in there and automate some of those mundane tasks, so I'm not doing it manually. As you will learn throughout this conversation, that I'm real big and pro AI, artificial intelligence, and automate some of those mundane tasks. But yeah, for the most part, man, just utilizing AI, and utilizing different data sets to be more efficient at what I do. But for the most part, I have an idea of who I target. You'll realize, especially with me being in cybersecurity space as well, people are predictable, and they give way too much information than they need to, especially within our community. So it doesn't make it hard to really attract the customers that we need. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So, what's something what's a critical element in your business plan that really, set you apart from, other competitors or other brands that's along the lines of yours?
Yeah, for the most part, I'm just give you a little bit of background on AI, right? You probably know there's not a lot of black entrepreneurs that's in the tech industry, as is right now. So that sets me apart in that aspect right now. But it's all information, right? Everything that we do and utilize technology for is to be more, more efficient, more profitable, and more productive at what we do. So if everyone is trying to be more productive, more profitable, and more productive at what they do, so they use some form of technology, right? Whether you realize it or not. And a lot of people saying that they're scared of AI, but at the end of the day, the margin happens when you have somebody utilizing AI as opposed to someone who's not utilizing AI, right? So, and I'm a firm believer, and my organization is in you, right? And in you is in you, not on you, to be and do whatever it is that you want to do in your life, right? And I believe that everyone has a gift as something that they really want to, be proactive and provide the world with, but a lot of people don't really have the strategic measures to do so, right? And so we feel that, essentially, if you implement these tools, that being AI. Of course, you want to be able to automate some of those tasks that you could be doing manually. And then you got to have the financial literacy behind what you do, to the point to once you start profiting at what you do, how are you reinvesting that back into your organization so that you can be more profitable, right? And
Exactly.
then once you get to the point that you being profitable, I know people go through things, not even go through things, people grow through things, right? But you also have to have the personal development, understand what you do and how you want to do it, right? So that's why we provide AI solutions, financial solution, and personal and organizational development to help an individual and organization to be more effective and efficient at what they do.
I love it. I love it. And it's definitely needed out here, man. I tell everybody that I consult and all of our members, AI is super important to really incorporate. You see it even with the bigger companies. Everybody is incorporating AI, within their companies and using
Yeah.
AI. It's rapidly growing. It's so many AI tools out. We just did a shout out to my boy D Hudson, who did a whole presentation on one of our brainstorming sessions a couple months ago, about how to
Sure.
build AI, app, with AI. And there's just so many different things that you could do with it. And we in the right time right now. I wouldn't be scared of it. For the most part, I tell people to dive full force into it, and learn as much as you can. Incorporate it as much as you can into your what you love into your business, and thrive of it. I'm one of the ones. I'm like you. I love AI. I use a lot of different AI tools, even with our brand. To make sure that we just as efficient as possible. And it's definitely changed the game for sure, for sure. So, hey,
And another thing that I wanted to highlight as well too, AI is a $1 trillion market, man, and black entrepreneurs only make up 1% of that. And for me, I'm an individual who's real active in the community, and about gaining economic mobility, social and political mobility within our community. Well, what is the best way to do that, right? And it's all information, right? A lot of the intelligence that we have is information, data, but how do we actually execute that data in a way that in which we're efficient? So if we're not utilizing AI, and those other communities are, well, that's the margin right there. The margin is between when we gather the information, when me and you communicating right now, the audience that's listening, they're getting information, they're getting data that's going into their brain. But the margin what lies with then the community that does execute on the information and apply the AI, as opposed to the ones who don't execute the information and apply the AI. So if we're making up 1% and we're talking about we want economic mobility, social and political mobility in our communities, well, we have to execute on the information. We can't sit on it too long because other communities are doing so, other companies are doing so, other individuals are doing so.
I definitely agree. I definitely agree. It's time to stop being scared,
Yeah,
and move full force with it, because it's going to get to the point, like you said, that we're going to be left in the dust, steady advancing and growing, and we're still on a basic level. There's still so many different businesses that I talk to now, that's still not using AI. Um, or even if you're not using AI, it's somebody around you that understand it and understand the different tools, and
yeah.
pretty much know how to do it from there as well. And I think that's super important. So, real quick, man, it's super important when we're talking about marketing. And I know you was just saying how um, you know, people is really predictable. Can you share like a surprising insight you discovered doing your market research that really kind of shaped your business idea?
Well, like I said, I'm for the most part that shook my business idea. It's just simply, duplicating and coming up with parallel systems as to what I've already seen in the market. You know, um, I mean, there's a lot of companies right now that's striving for centralization, right? And they're doing that for a reason, to really monopolize the market. But a lot of black organizations not doing that. If everyone is centralizing and continues to monopolize these different industries, where does that leave us, right? And I was saying that, essentially, as a black individual here in America, we only make 1% of that, right? And so it's like I don't see any other black organization that specializing in centralizing these different services, so you can have a one stop shop for everything that it is that you need, right? And so it's like, okay, well, at the end of the day, we use this technology, we use this technology, we use this technology, but a lot of us don't really know how to implement them effectively, right? Because you're spending so much time going in this direction, you spending this much time going in this direction. Well, you find yourself in that you become stagnated because of that, and you get burnt out and stuff like that. But if you have a solution or subject matter experts that can help you implement these different technologies for it is whatever it is that your resolve is, you find yourself being more efficient, right? And so that's where, essentially outsourcing, to someone that looks like me and you, that helps mobilize our community in a way that we can be more profitable, not only as an individual but as a community as well, right? Because I'm not a subject matter expert at all things, but you have people out there that looks like me and you, right? And so even for me and you, that's why we sitting on the call right now, because at some point we're essentially going to build out, infrastructure with one another, right? But yeah, I mean, that's for the most part, that's what kind of coined my idea. It's just really duplicating, what I already see going on in the market, what others are really not paying attention to. And I know there's a company out there right now by the name of Simio. They specialize in cybersecurity, and basically what they do is they're not really a cybersecurity company, but they integrate and plug into those major cybersecurity companies that are out there. Because at the end of the day, if you need a cybersecurity service or AI solutions, you want to figure out what's the right solution for you. Well, if you know a centralized person or a vendor that that specializes in understanding how to apply all of these technologies, then you find yourself being more efficient again, right? So same thing with the idea that I have now. The company that I have now is I'm centralizing AI technology, financial literacy, personal and organizational development. Every individual and organization needs that, right? Because it's so, I mean, if you understand, like, the evolution of technology is more technology coming out every single day,
every single
right? And who's going to keep up with that?
every single
Who's
day.
going to keep up with that? No one is going to keep up with that.
Man, it's astounding. Um,
Yeah.
so real quick, man, how do you approach budgeting for your business, and what strategies do you use to ensure financial stability?
All money in, man, like Nipsey Hussle said. For me, for the most part, man, I'm in the situation like Jeff Bezos is right now. We're early development stage, so it's more so about the data. So at this early development stage in which we're in, is all money in, right? Every dollar that we spend goes right back into the business, right? Every loose change that we have, we implement it into new systems, new technology that can allow us to attract, and accumulate more customers, and more users. We're also working on a platform where it's called All Things AI. And you can literally sit there and it's a do it yourself service where we don't have to essentially do the service for you and implement it. You can do it yourself, but you have to service it. But at the same time, you can find yourself spending a lot more less money, as opposed to have it using us as a service provider. I can't hear you.
So no,
Okay,
we
there
was
we go.
talking about investing in yourself last week, and I think that's super important. All money in for sure. And I think at the end of the day, man, it's money moves the movement. And you got to
Yeah.
invest in yourself. You got to invest in what you got going on. So that's the most important part of it. But understanding and having people in place to help you navigate is really where it's at. Like you said, outsourcing people, like me and you, to really get the job done. Is super important because you
Yeah.
know, we bump our heads. If you entrepreneur, you will bump your head and kind of put money in the wrong places. So it's super important because
Yeah.
we all work hard for our money and we all want to put it in the right place and make sure that it's beneficial to us for sure. That's a super.
Yeah, and for the most part, like I'm not like I said, even with me, I'm not a real big finance guy. I'm more of a visionary type of guy, right? But I do have a plethora of knowledge in which I apply to the world. But I do have people in place. Like I have a CFO, Eddie Wilson. He specializes in finance. I don't. So when it comes down to the budget and stuff like that, that's gonna be the person that you talk to. You know what I mean? That's gonna be the person that I talk to. But yeah, but I mean, essentially, just like any other, individual or organization, you do want to place your money that's gonna, in asset classes that's gonna outpace inflation. And you think about it right now, like I said initially, technology is literally put in our lives, and we utilize it to be more efficient, more profitable at what we do. So it makes sense to more so invest into technology companies. It makes sense to build technology companies. It makes sense to invest in digital currencies, right? Everything about digital assets is just faster, so just investing into digital assets essentially make us more profitable at what we do.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I always tell people, man, get your digital real estate in order for sure, because that's the world that's the world we living in. You can't go against the tide. I mean, you can try, but you know, why do it? Technology is where it's at, especially if you utilize it in the right thing. You utilize the right tools. When I tell you, it make your life so much easier for sure. So I think you're going down the right path. As far as what your company is doing, and man, we got a lot of work to do. As far as working together, a lot of it's a lot of ideas going in my head for sure. So,
Yeah.
quick man, what's one of your most memorable interactions you've had? How did it really impact your approach?
Um, I mean, just essentially getting a lot of rejections, man. What I realized, it's a lot of people out here, man, that don't want to appreciate, somebody that's mobilizing, right? And so for me, it's like when I get those rejections, it's just being steadfast to the vision that I have and truly and what I truly believe in. But I've had situations, customers will come and say, try to give me bad reviews and stuff like that. Um, but I mean, I really haven't had too many for the most part. Um, but I mean, at the end of the day, for me in technology, man, we don't necessarily always have a right fitting solution because every company is unique in its own. And you start to realize that in technology is that we don't have a one size fit all solution for everyone. And when we presented with those unique situations, we then come back and develop those solutions for said customers. um, so yeah, that's for the most part. Just developing the right solution for the customer for the most part.
I think that's super important for both parties to understand. I think that's something that we do very well. As far as and I tell people all the time, we want to create solutions, because it's the same thing with our memberships. One tier don't fit all. There's different things. Different people come in with different size companies, different problems, and we have different solutions. So I think it's all about building and making sure you have a technical team in place to where we can, troubleshoot when we do have problems that's going to arrive, which it's going to happen, man. Like this is not
Yeah,
for the it's
it's
just
it's going to happen, and it's like, and specifically in our community, I what I want to see us do better is like when we're having those bad experiences with these companies is having a little bit of empathy at the end of the day, because we're essentially trying to scale up. There's no way that we can compete with those macro companies like IBM, Accenture, the list goes on and on. But at the end of the day, we have to build our companies to the point that where we can be as effective as them. At the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, would you trust, Accenture or IBM with your data as opposed to someone that looks like you with your data? And then you have to turn around and ask the same question. How is this going to help us be more economically efficient if we pouring our data and our information to companies that we don't own, right? So I think we're being counterproductive when we do stuff like that. But at the end of the day, once you start something, and you growing something, you right fit yourself. I mean, every company makes mistakes, right? But along that journey, we right fit the solution, and be able to provide you a better user or customer experience as well. Like I said, we just have to have a little bit of empathy with one another.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the main reasons why we really started to reshift how we approached even putting out our services and service in the community. In building like a community, because once you start building like a community with love and respect, as the base and foundation, then once you arrive to these different problems, you can be able to have sympathy and be able to come to a solution a lot more easier. So it's super important for us to build as a community, come together as a community, look at each other as brother and sister. So when when these problems arrive, we'll have a little bit more patience for each other. And when I tell you it's been working numbers, shout out to all of our members who really been just hitting the ground running.
Yeah,
Like I said, it's really that perfect time right now to be an entrepreneur. And even in within this year, just the second quarter, these next few months is going to be super important. So shout out to everybody that's just been crushing it. We got a lot of great big things that's coming up, for the summer. So it's super important for us to keep that in mind, man. Let's keep on building together. We're not enemies. So there's no need to. I think those same people that gave you those reviews could have came back to you like, hey, and that's why we put out surveys too, because I
yeah,
do want to hear your feedback though too, because I do feel
yeah,
like
true.
as I'm not one of those people that's gonna be like, hey, because you have a black business, I'm just gonna support you. If you know, and I think that's why we do what we do as well, because there's a lot of businesses out here that is struggling. So why not give them the solution to their, what they got going on? Because it is hard being an entrepreneur. It is hard building anything. You get what I'm saying? So, but at the same time, I think putting out surveys and getting, putting out, giving people a different platform to let you know where you can expand and grow will always be great as well. And it do wonder for us, like and we put them out anonymous, so we don't really know who put it out. So you could just say, we want the truth. We want you to give us the hard truth, and it's private. We get to see it. You let us know, and it does wonder for the growth. And a lot of that feedback we take, in real consideration. Like, okay, maybe we'll change the way we do X, Y, and Z. And man, when I tell you, people notice that, and most of the time when we get our surveys in, we've been getting a lot of love because people notice the growth and they notice that we take that in consideration. So I think that's super important for everybody, man. If you got a brand, if you got a business, put out surveys. Make sure you have some type of survey in hand. And for people that's consuming, man, support your businesses, man. If that's giving some real feedback through a survey, or call them directly. If you know the person,
Yeah.
let them know. Like, don't just be a yes man either. Let them know, like, hey, this could have been better. And I think that's we're gonna figure out how to grow. Again.
Yeah, and what I want to veg back on what you said is like, we tend to publicize, that those feedbacks, and a lot of times we can, like I said, if we have those surveys, please fill out those surveys because, people hone in on the negative more than they do the positive. 9 times out of 10, you see one negative review, that's what they lead with as opposed to the positive. So definitely reach out to, the owners of the companies, or the employees of the company to give that constructive feedback, because we need it, especially within our community, so we can actually scale and mobilize ourselves economically. And essentially, if you have one bad experience, still continue to support. You know what I mean? Like I tell people all the time, I was like, if you used to go to Walmart and you had one bad experience with the cashier, you're not gonna not go to Walmart ever again because you had that one bad experience with that cashier. But those are monopolies. Give small companies a chance to really scale and really do business with you.
Yeah, and redeem themselves if they did.
Yeah, to
You
redeem
know,
themselves.
yeah. So I think that's super important. I ain't never really talked about that aspect of the business, and I'm glad you really kept it real with us. And I think this type of dialogue is super important for us to have. So I'm glad that you really kept it real. I really wasn't expecting you to go that way because especially when um, you know, especially when you building a business and it's your baby, you don't really want to, sometimes admit to certain things, So, or you want to, we in the time right now, especially social media area where everybody just want to look like it's all good. It's like no, it's
Yeah,
not good.
I had a conversation with the president of one of my companies that I was working with. He was like, "Man, you know what? It's easier to serve other people than it is with yourself, because when you serving yourself, you really got to tell the truth about yourself. And a lot of people don't want to know the truth about themselves because it hurts. It's painful, because you think essentially you doing everything right. You want to think that you're doing everything right, but in actuality, it's always a better way to do something, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that you
We
said that.
always say, man, hey, we always gonna remain a student to the game. Always remain a student to the game, because things could change. We've seen that with the pandemic. We're in a whole new millennium. This is something that I've been talking about for a long time. Making sure our community is adapting and making sure the people around me can be able to change because it's super important, man, for us to kind of adapt to what's really going on out here. So real quick, what's some advice that you give to entrepreneurs seeking funding for the first time based on your own experience?
Well, where I'm at with it, man, like I said, for the most part, I'm for mobilizing the community and ensure that we are economically prosperous, politically and socially prosperous as well. Especially for my community, I'm passionate about my community. So for especially entrepreneurs that look like me, I would say go to your family members. Go to them first, right? I'm not real big on banks because at the end of the day, that interest, the owners of those companies, they don't look like me and you, so those that interest in what you paying off, it goes back into that community. So they make it more of a profit than you are. So for the most part, I say go to your family members, or if high net worth individuals within your community, your circle. If not, go seek those people and seek in your network, and then your extended network. For me, for the most part, I was just out here in Atlanta just networking and shaking the right hands and explaining it and articulating my vision, right? And sure enough, you realize that a lot of older people, they wanted to pursue entrepreneurship but didn't really have the bandwidth, or probably failed over and over again. So they understand that, but you have to really know what it is that you want to do and believe in. If you don't believe in your vision, no one else is going to truly believe in it. So you got to be able to bring that vision to those individuals and really be able to articulate it in a way in which they're buying into it as well, right? And you got to stay steadfast to what it is that you're trying to do. Don't try to do anything. You have to be what you want to come into your life, right? And so you have to be it, sleep it, and list goes on and on about your vision, you know.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hey, preach it, man. Preach it, man. You got to believe in yourself for sure. You just can't go out here and act for it. But I think that's a good predicament, to be in. To really be able to kind of reach out to your circle. I think that's how it's supposed to be. I know a lot of people might not have that opportunity, but
Yeah.
now last like even like I believe last week we was talking about different things like different platforms like Kickstarter and stuff like that that you can reach out to and get some crowdfunding and get
Yeah, you get crowdfunding and stuff like that as well too. So yeah.
yeah, so I think that's super big. I think that's, I think we only want know one way. I think that's super, that's a super important topic for us to talk about because sometimes we only know, the bootstrapping, and that's cool too. We all got
Yeah.
to bootstrap it sometime. But if we can really push it along by pulling together our community, and pulling together, like you said, high value individuals to really believe in what it is that we're doing. But at the same time, making sure that it's up to par, making sure that we have a plan, making sure that you have um, and like you said, making sure that you are what you say you are, and then kind of move forward from there. Because we got to bring the trust back into the community as well. So I think that's a super important part of it because we've been burnt. A lot of us been burnt a lot of times. So that's the other side of it. Bringing back the trust and making sure that we on our p's and q's that we can do that.
Yeah, and I also believe, man, just veggie back off what you're saying as well too. I know you mentioned earlier that this is the greatest time to essentially start a business, but it is also the greatest time to just simply invest as well too. A lot of people talking about the market is down. We're going into a potential recession and stuff like that. Well, I truly believe, man, like if the market is not down right now, or if it was at where it was at, you're probably not going to make as much money as you are going to be able to potentially make right now. So it is the best time to really invest, and we talk about cryptos and stuff like that. That is the perfect time to get in. We talking about decentralized network, decentralized currencies, giving you the ability to essentially rewrite and own any intellectual property that comes out of your head. I think a lot of the times, you know we don't look at intellectual property as an asset, when in actuality it is. Anything that comes out of your mind, you're able to really have an opportunity to make some money off of it. right? So, heading up into Web3 technologies and stuff like that, it's the perfect time to really adopt these technologies now when, you don't have a lot of users, you don't have a lot of customers utilizing these technologies. I know it's early on. A lot of people not using cryptocurrencies right now, but it is heading in a direction. People is talking about it, you still have an opportunity to get in early with it right now, right? We talk about 5 to 10 years from now, you'll be essentially a wealthy individual, right? A lot of people say that, well, I don't really trust Bitcoin or whatever the case may be. Well, if you think about Bitcoin and the price that it was at, from 2009 as opposed to now, I tell people all the time, I was like, hey, if you would invest $1 into Bitcoin, in 2009, you'd be sitting on $1.6 million, right? And you ask yourself, what other asset class is performing like that? Man, you starting a business, and a lot of times we're not seeing those returns, and in those years of time. I think it was like XRP and stuff like that. Turning 555% over 3 months. There's no other asset class that's doing that right now. Most businesses are not profitable within the first 3 to 5 years.
Yeah,
So just to give you some perspective of the performance of these assets, most houses not turning that type of return, and in 5 years. Most cars are not turning that asset, or whatever it is that you're doing that you make a profit is not turning that return, let alone outpacing inflation. So this is a grand opportunity to really invest and start business for sure.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So, what's one key factor that really contribute most to your business growth, and how did you identify and capitalize off the opportunity?
Like I said, for the most part, it's just AI, just my passion and drive for AI, like doing thorough research and really staying up on the market, doing a lot of reading and research, and essentially just paying attention and keeping my eyes open. I actually got this idea from a company that I work with, last year. Uh, I just essentially, built a parallel system parallel to it. And over the past 3 years, my business specifically had went through a couple of iterations, and it's going to continuously go through a couple of iterations because business evolve just like technologies evolve. Like the business that you have now is going to look totally different even 3 4 years from now.
Man,
So just paying attention and adopting the information faster than everybody else is doing it.
exactly. Most definitely.
Yeah.
I love that. So, how has your mindset evolved as a leader, and what practices do you incorporate to maintain a positive spirit?
For me, Brent, I just go internal, man. Just going into the darkness of my mind, really truly understanding who I am, what it is that I want out of life, right? And I like to use this terminology all the time. It's like I'm not trying to do anything. I'm being who I want to be. At the end of the day, we human beings, we're not human tryings. And so when you're in that state of being, everything, that you want is gonna come to you because you understand really truly who you are in this on this planet Earth or in the universe. So just being, man, just being.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So, you know, I know earlier you was talking about how you really shook a lot of hands and did a lot of networking, especially in the Atlanta area where it's always something going on in Atlanta. I think it's the best place to be as far as meeting different individuals in the business spaces and just different industries. What's your most important lesson you've learned about pitching your business effectively?
Um, Going back to what I was saying, man, is just truly believing in what it is that you're saying, right? Like I said, if you don't truly believe in it, and then let alone know how to articulate it in a way, in which people receive it, then it is nothing. You got to be able to effectively communicate what it is that you're trying to do. A closed mouth don't get fed, man. And what I realized, at the time, you know, um, and for me, I'm around a lot of older people. Older people love, to see ambitious young people. And I tell anyone, man, if you're a young individual and you truly want to pursue something in this world, it's the perfect time to do it because older people love helping young people. Especially if you really truly believe in what it is that you want to do. Now, as you get towards the older age, it's like, all right, now you've been saying that you've been doing this for a couple of years and it still haven't became fruitful yet. You
Right.
know, so it gives you something to think about. But nobody, no one wants to deal with a 40-year-old who's still talking about they want to do this but not doing and not executing on the plan. Don't tell me what you want to do. Tell me what you're doing. And then we can go from there. Don't tell me what you're trying to do. Tell me what you're being. You know.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes,
yeah, man, just truly believing in myself and taking the initiative to learn and develop my skill sets and and truly embracing what I don't know and then trying to, not trying, but going to know or gain the information so that I can execute on the information when I'm out in my reality.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Real quick, man, let the people know where they can find you and what you have coming up next, man.
Yeah, man. So you can find me once again. My name is Nkosi. You can find me at real_n.u.king. And I have, yeah, man, I'm working on an application that I'm looking to deploy here in a few months that I'm working on. And so just stay tuned. Can't say too much because we'll have to get these NDAs out.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.